So welcome back. We are back with what is in continuation with the new economic policy 1991, and we are going to talk what was liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And in this, we are going to talk about the negative impact. So there was a lot of criticism. It has been widely criticized for not being able to deliver so much, in the sense we did have the poverty levels were there. There was growth in GDP, but the employment didn't show so much of growth, in the sense that there was a lot of unemployment. And if we talk about, the growth was jobless, as they said. So we will talk about these points. Agriculture didn't show much. There was slow growth. There was slow growth in industries. So we're just going to go through a quickly we're going to go through. Just look at this. Yeah. So talking about the negative impact, it was found that the growth of agriculture actually declined. The reason, there was fall in the public investment in agricultural sectors, especially in infrastructure, which includes irrigation, power, roads. Then we also found that there was a removal of subsidies. Say, for example, the fertilizer subsidy. So this led to the increase in the cost of production, so which severely affected the small and the marginal farmers. Then there was this export-oriented policy strategies in agriculture. So there was this shift in the production from domestic market towards production for the export market, focusing on cash crops in lieu of production of food grains. So then again, this put pressure on prices of food grains. Then we also found that in agriculture, there was this increased international competition. Now what is this? So number of policy changes, such as reduction in import duties on agricultural products, removal of minimum support prices, and something like this, all this affected Indian farmers, because now they had to face increased international competition. So that was it. Then even let's talk about the industrial growth. So India is seen as a successful exporter of auto parts, engineering goods, IT software, and textiles in the reform period. But industrial growth has also recorded a slowdown. And the reasons are basically that there was this decreasing demand of industrial products. Why? Because the availability of cheaper imports. And this was because globalization has created conditions for the free movement of goods and services from foreign countries. And cheaper imports have replaced the demand for domestic goods. Now Domestic manufacturers are facing competition from imports. Thus, globalization adversely affected the local industries and also employment opportunities in our country. Also, we can talk of this decreasing demand of industrial products was due to lower investment. The infrastructural facilities, including power supply, have remained inadequate due to lack of investment. And also, we find that we could not access the developed countries' markets. A developing country like India still does not have the access to developed countries' markets. Why? Because of high non-tariff barriers. That means for all, we have removed quota restrictions. But say USA has not removed their quota restrictions on import of textiles from India. So that's another reason. that we can find. So, talking about that, then we can say that we could talk about, say, disinvestment. Now, regarding this, say disinvestment. So, under its policy of disinvestment, the assets of the public sector undertakings, what they did was they undervalued them and sold them to the private sector. So, this was a substantial loss to the government. Moreover, the proceeds from disinvestments were not even used for the development of the public sector undertakings and for building social infrastructure in the country. And it was used basically to meet the deficits in the government revenues. So that was also not a good thing. And another thing was, we can talk about control over the economy by the MNCs, the multinational companies. Now, what is this? It was it was like an economic colonialism. See, we suffered nearly 200 years of political colonialism under the British rule, and now MNCs were expanding their economic control. So it was something like as if we would suffer from what is known as economic colonialism, which means that the MNCs are exploiting the Indian markets to sell their products, and in the process, domestic products producers, the domestic products or the producers who are making them are pushed back, or they are marginalized owing to their poor competitive strength. So that also was found. And talking about this, we felt that there was this lopsided growth process, the rural-urban divide as we see. So there was this growth process, but it was not an inclusive growth process. It did not include all the sectors of the economy. Increasingly, of course, it was relying on the service sector of the economy, which did show enough growth also, which we spoke about. In fact, the IT-focused growth process, it sort of overshadowed the process of industrialization here, and also neglected the farming sector. So that also was there, and based on this, what we find is that urban areas were developing, as we just pointed out. So the urban-rural gap is widening, and there is this spread of consumerism, which means that a variety of global brands in the market has sort of forced the masses to become spendthrift, going beyond their means. And they are adapting itself to the Western culture of spending through borrowing. There are people who buy big cars or big brands or branded things based on borrowing, which is encouraged. But of course, this expands the size of the market for the traders and the manufacturers, but then the households as consumers are getting vulnerable to this. And then we can talk about the jobless growth, which is the most disturbing aspect of the post-1991 economic reforms. That, as we just pointed out, that the economic growth rate has increased, but jobs have failed to keep pace. And the quality of existing jobs has also deteriorated, with the percentage of workers in the informal sector that is increasing. And based on all this, we see that poverty is still here to stay. It is widespread. Uh, in urban areas, standard of living has increased, but uh, there's one fourth of the total population which is not even in a position to earn even bare means of subsistence, and public expenditure has been reduced on projects meant for poor, and then they have cut subsidies on food and agricultural inputs, and that could again affect the people in the rural areas and especially agricultural sector, which pushes the people into poverty. So that's